Hello, welcome to the Distractables, a podcast by ADHDers for ADHDers talking about ADHD tips and tricks to help get you through daily life. I'm your co-host, Marie. I'm also the founder of Llama Life, which is an app to help people with ADHD get through daily tasks and routines. And I'm here with my friend, Jesse J. Anderson.
Hey, I'm Jesse. I'm the author of Extra Focus, the quick start guide to adult ADHD. And I also write a weekly newsletter called Extra Focus at extrafocus.com.
Awesome. And today we're here with a special guest, our good friend, Christal Wang. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of Shimmer, which is the #1 coaching platform designed for adults with ADHD. And Chris was also diagnosed with ADHD as an adult and is now on a mission to create a more neurodiverse and inclusive world for neurodivergent individuals. She's also part of and cares very deeply for the LGBTQ community and women and non-binary communities. Welcome to the podcast, Christal.
Oh, thank you for the introduction. And I'm super excited because I use and am subscribed to all of the things that you guys just said and created. So thanks for being you.
Amazing.
Awesome.
And today we're going to talk about being late diagnosed with ADHD and all the things that come with that. And the three of us are all diagnosed as adults. Chris, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background and your relationship with ADHD?
Yeah. So I grew up undiagnosed and in a very Asian family, as you may know, Marie. But
Yes.
Asians don't like to talk about mental health. And I think neurodivergence is in some ways even one level less understood than mental health. And I was also all of the things that Asians were not expected to be. I was loud, I was talkative, I was disruptive, constantly getting in trouble everywhere. But mental health or ADHD was never the explanation. The explanation is usually that's a disobedient kid, like that person is not listening to us. They just need more discipline. So that was a little bit of my upbringing as it relates to ADHD. And I just rebelled against it. And I think I became more of like a rebel who didn't like going to class because of all the bad experiences that I had around it. So I would skip class a lot. None of my teachers really liked me. I always got actually think I might have seen one of Jesse's posts about the high potential I'm probably butchering it, but like high potential, but doesn't apply, could do so many things if she applied herself. So I think, I think I might have seen one of your tweets about that and I would just try to like it like 30 times. And I've now learned that a lot of people get diagnosed essentially when things are not going so well later in life. So I had an inkling. I knew about ADHD. I saw it on TikTok, all that jazz. And I had a lot of structure in my life in my first job. And I think that even though I didn't like it philosophically, it kept me like sitting on the horse and doing all the right steps because it was so structured. And then once I became an entrepreneur and stopped working for someone else and stopped having the structure and was also expected to put structure on other people, that was when everything started to fall apart. And that was when I sought my diagnosis.
Yeah, that's really interesting about that trigger point and the sort of structure to lack of structure. I can relate to that a lot. So I grew up in an Asian family as well. Everything you said about the mental health stuff, and it just doesn't exist because they're like, oh, you got to try harder or, and do that. Mm-hmm. But I had a very structured upbringing as well. My mom was on top of it. School this time, after school, you do this, whatever. And then when I went to university, totally fell apart because nobody's on your back to tell you have to be in this lecture at a particular time. You have to do it, but no one's making you do it. So I used to just not go to any lectures and started to really struggle around that time, but didn't get diagnosed until way later. But I definitely noticed that's when it fell apart, was when I hit university and I could do whatever I want. And when I got my car, when I had the freedom to drive and do whatever I wanted, just fell apart. No one's taking me around and telling me I had to be somewhere at a particular time.
And so did you consider then when it first started falling apart, or did you know about ADHD?
No, didn't even consider it because, I don't know, maybe it's the Asian sort of upbringing as well. No, nothing can be wrong. It's just that you just stop procrastinating and just start doing things. And yeah, you're capable of doing it, but you're not doing it. Like, how come you can't just do it? It was that so typical. And I only realized it way later because when I went to work, someone at work had ADHD. And he said to me, I think you have ADHD. So he actually helped me get diagnosed. I just went to see his psychiatrist because he told me, here's the phone number. We're going to call it together. Let's just do it. It's around the corner from work. Just set it up. He just pushed me to do it. And then that's when it all happened. But I never even considered it. Not once. Because I was like, I'm not hyperactive.
Yeah, I was the same. Chris, your story about just like school and stuff, very familiar to me. I remember it wasn't until high school when I skipped a class and then nothing happened. And so then I skipped another one and nothing happened. And then it was just like, I'm not going to any of the classes I don't like because there's no consequence. And then my grades, that's where the consequence started to show up. But I'm probably like at the time looking back, I was like sad that I missed out going off to university or whatever, because I just didn't do that. I graduated high school, I did the part-time work or whatever for a while, and then I did go to community college. And for me, it wasn't, I was paying for it out of my own pocket. But similarly, I put like 3.5 years into community college and almost got that 2-year degree and never quite did. So it was just like a big waste of time. And there were several classes that were like, there was a computer class that was boring. And I took the same class like 3 times because it was a prereq. It was a prerequisite for other classes that I wanted to take, but I just couldn't do it. I would get like halfway through the class and just bail and stop going. And so I paid for that class 3 times and I never passed it. So yeah.
Oh, no.
So I had a lot of that similar sort of experience of just, there wasn't any structure. Like so many people with ADHD, like we despise structure, but we also need it. And so there's this dilemma of like how to find the structure that can be helpful without feeling like it's like entrapping me. Because I don't want to get stuck, because then I'm going to rebel and do something stupid or foolish. But without any structure, then nothing's ever going to get done. I'm just left to wherever the wind takes me.
Yeah, the structure piece is exactly what you said. I think it's, we don't want it, but we need it. And I recently actually went through, small tangent, but recently with our team, I added this new type of monthly like review and look forward in addition to the other systems we had. And I remember when I introduced it, I apologized so much to everyone because everyone on our team has ADHD. And I was like, I'm sorry, I have to add this, but these are the problems I'm seeing. And everyone literally was like, thank you. Like, we needed this and we needed someone to just tell us this. And I was like, I was so worried about bringing it up too, because I was like, no one's going to want this. No one wants all these like extra rules. And honestly, everyone was thankful that I just imposed those rules, which is so counterintuitive.
Yeah, I had a boss where I had a really bad situation where I would have little details I'd forget my job or whatever. And then he was writing those down as issues I had, but never telling me. And so I had no idea that in his mind, I was getting worse and worse at my job because he was like collecting this list of things and I had no idea. And so then it was like, we eventually had basically like a performance meeting where he gave me here's all the issues I've seen over the last year. And I had no idea about any of them.
Why are you collecting this? Why didn't you tell us?
I know, it's so frustrating. But because of that, now I really know it's really important that I get that regular check-in with my manager or whoever. So I want to make sure that we are both on the same page and that I think I'm doing as well as my manager, he or she thinks I'm doing. So there's no surprises when we have some sort of meeting, because that was not a very fun surprise. So I think some level of structure is really important to really help give you that kind of assurance, because that was one situation where I thought I was doing awesome. And there's been other jobs where I thought I was doing terrible. And then my manager was like, what are you talking about? You're doing great. And I was like feeling all this extra stress and all that comes with that feeling like you're not doing good enough. And my manager thought I was doing great. And so a lot of it is just that I'm just stabbing guesses out there of like how I think I'm doing and then making that my reality. So having some sort of structure and regular check-in, now that I know about my ADHD, is super, super important.
Yeah. It's so
I think
hard.
honestly, more managers need to embody, I'm obviously biased, but my mindset is if someone's doing bad, and I tell people on our team, if you're doing bad or if you're doing good, you will know. Like there will be no ambiguity around it. And it's also fine to do bad, quote unquote bad. I actually don't use the word bad, but there's always areas that you want to improve. And I'll actually tell them, this is a thing that you need to improve on because it's a weakness, versus this is a thing you need to improve on, but because it takes you to the next level, like you're actually great at it, but if you want to improve it, this is how it looks like. And I feel like clear communication is something that a lot of neurotypical managers just have been thought about or been trained on because they maybe are better at reading through the lines, or they don't have as much RSD, or whatever all the other reasons might be that they haven't been exposed to it.
Yeah, one thing we do is very similar. We're a small team of 3, but we're very open in terms of our strengths and our weaknesses. And we all know each other's strengths and weaknesses. One thing we try and do is go, okay, we know this is an area you need to improve, but how can we work as a team to help you do that? So it's not just on that person to improve. We actually say, all right, you're struggling here, and you do need to own that and improve that, but we can work together and put certain things in place to help you do that, as long as you can't come through yourself in the end. But in the meantime, we all try and make up for each other's, for lack of a better word, like deficits. And I definitely have mine with ADHD. Even for this podcast today, I got the reminder. Nee was saying to me, okay, are you good for the podcast? Like, it's in this much time and here's the intro. And she knows I'm not good with that stuff. So she'll just prompt me and say, hey, I have an alarm as well. So I do own it. I do have an alarm, but she'll say, hey, are you good? You're good. You got everything. You know where everything is. And it sounds almost a bit childish, but I need that. It's, hey, you got this. You got, remember this thing is on. And she knows that's my weakness. Yeah, we just try and make up for each other because we're a team, right?
Yeah, especially if it's something that she's good at or she likes to do, then that's like when you can make magic together, right? When everyone's just doing what they want to do.
Yeah. It's like a little jigsaw puzzle. Everything's coming together. I just want to go back to one thing you said, Jessie, about the balance between the structure and having the structure but not wanting the structure. And it's such a fine balance. Like, when does it actually tip over to feeling like someone's on your back and someone's being overwhelming? And I was just thinking of an example. It's a non-work example, but I really noticed it. So my dog passed away about a year ago, and it's been really hard, but I kind of just realized he gave me so much structure, but in a fun way. Because I definitely fell apart after that from a ADHD and a structure point of view. Because when he was around, like, every morning we'd go for a walk and every afternoon we'd go for a walk. And that's non-negotiable, right? He needs to go out and have a walk. But it wasn't a chore for me because it was a fun thing we do together. So it was structure, but it felt like fun structure. And I was always planning for it. Right? When I woke up, I was like, I have to get up. So the first thing is even just getting out of bed. Sometimes that's really hard with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I had no choice because he needed to go out. And I felt okay about that. I'll get up, I'll go do the stuff that he needs. And it was okay. And then when he has to go for his afternoon
walk. It's easier when it's someone else too.
Somebody else. Yeah. No, 100%.
It's not for yourself.
You know what? I'm great at doing things for other people. It's just I have to do it for myself. If I have to go and help someone clean up their house, I can do that because I'm helping them. If I have to clean up my own house, that's really hard. But yeah, he gave me a lot of structure because even the afternoon walk, I'd plan stuff around that, like a meeting or not having a meeting. But he was the start and the end of my day. And that was super helpful for me. And I think the point I'm trying to make is it was structure without feeling overwhelming, and it was a fun structure as well. I don't know if there's some way we can take that and put it into other parts of our lives, being able to create structure, but in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming and not wanted.
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful kind of observation because there's been a few things like family calendars sort of stuff that we've implemented that have added little bits of structure that aren't a negative thing. I think a lot of times I hear, I need to add more structure. And what that means is, I need to add in a weekly review where I review my work things where I have to do it. It's like a should. It's, I should implement structure that helps me account for these sort of productivity things. But one thing we've done in our family, we started doing a family movie night on Friday nights. Through the summer, it was awesome. We were for me, rewatching, but introducing our kids to a lot of the 80s classics like Indiana Jones and movies like that, which was super fun. But then that gives a little bit of that structure so the days don't just bleed together. And we'll do other things. Like sometimes we will have, oh, every Thursday night is pizza night or something. And it's not really that big of a deal, but it's just something that gives a little anchor to that part of the week, to that part of the day. And another thing, we had to schedule this around Monday nights. I always go watch football with my dad. It's like a tradition I've been doing for years and years. Every Monday night during the fall, I go watch football with my dad. And it gives me one of those anchor points, which isn't that overbearing sort of structure, but it's something that gives me that anchor point that really helps me to feel time passing, because I know about that upcoming anchor point. And just like you said with walking your dog, it gives you something you can build around. Oh, I can do this thing before that other event that's going to happen, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, there's this terminology, I'm pretty sure it's called temporal landmarks. And it basically is like points in time that help you realize when the past is now transitioning to the present, to the future, because for people with ADHD, it's so hard to naturally feel time. So when you can put these temporal landmarks throughout your day, it gives you also a better sense so that you start to learn what time actually feels like. And I really struggled prior to when I was working from home. I used to live in LA and I worked from home, and I had no temporal landmarks. I would just wake up, barely roll into my Zoom screen, and then work until it was time to sleep, and then do food or whatever throughout the day. And I would squeeze things in throughout the day whenever I really needed it. But now, living in SF, and now that my co-founder also moved to SF, I come to the office in the morning and I leave the office at night. And I still, being a startup founder, I still work at night, but it's different because I have the landmarks to go into the office and out. It gives me the sense of urgency. So I try to finish all of my work at least by the time that I leave, even if I don't end up finishing it, versus before I would be taking my laptop into my bed because my bed was my office.
Right.
So I think creating that, I guess, like breakage of where you do certain things, plus the temporal landmark, has been really helpful for me in terms of putting structure down.
Yeah, these little markers throughout the day. Yeah, cool. So I guess going back to the topic of late diagnosis. So Chris, you mentioned a trigger, and I had a trigger in my life as well. Jesse, did you have some trigger with yours? What made you seek a diagnosis?
Yeah, so for me, I struggled in many mighty ways throughout most of my life. But for me, it was a friend of mine got diagnosed, and then his wife and my wife were friends, and so they were talking. And one day my wife said to me, like, hey, maybe you should look into this ADHD thing, because it's a lot of the things sound a lot like you. And I was very much, no way. I don't have that at all. Nope. Because of the things we said. I wasn't super hyperactive as a kid, and I didn't have what I considered the symptoms of ADHD, because I had this whole different perspective of what I thought it was. And for me, I thought that if you had ADHD, that meant you couldn't focus on anything at all for any amount of time. And I knew that I could very much focus on things I was interested in for a very long amount of time, but I didn't know what hyperfocus was back then. So that was one of the things. When my wife had mentioned that, I looked into it a little bit, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Some of these things sound familiar. And then a few of the things that popped out, one of them was learning about hyperfocus. And I was like, oh, that actually, I thought that was a thing that disqualified me from possibly having ADHD, but it was actually something that's very common. It's almost like a trademark of having ADHD, that hyperfocus. And so that was really a quick trigger for me. I was lucky to have a job at the time where I had a manager that I had a great relationship with. We didn't know about my ADHD, but we quickly learned how to work well with each other so that the normal issues didn't happen too much with this job, because I had a really great manager. But finding out about ADHD and then learning all about it really helped me improve a lot of other areas of my life, because I would say my work life was doing pretty well at the time, but my relationships, particularly with my wife, not doing so well at the time. And so that was a huge couple of years where we started going to counseling and then learning how ADHD was affecting the relationship and everything like that. So, yeah. And at that time, there was no TikTok. There was like 30-year-old books. And that's what I had to do my ADHD education with. So I was like, I hope this is still relevant. And some of it was, and some of it was not. But
yeah, I think one of the super beautiful things that has come out of the ADHD online community is it's so much easier for people nowadays to realize that ADHD looks so different in everyone, and you can find it not just between inattentive and hyperactive, but seeing how it impacts people of different backgrounds or coming from different communities or socioeconomic backgrounds, and finding someone that looks like you and them talking about their ADHD and being like, I think I'm that. Versus before, when you just look at the DSM-5 criteria, no one feels like they're that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the three of us are all quite positive about it now, our late diagnosis. Chris, when you first figured out that this is what it was, like how did it make you feel, like emotionally? What did you go through at the time? I'm just thinking other people that are going through that, maybe they can relate to some of this.
So I'm a generally very optimistic person. So I don't know if my experience is super common, but I was so sick of just everything I was going through and all the ways I was not performing well, that when I found out, my first reaction was like, oh my gosh, like there's probably a solution. And I just went into hyper focus mode with trying to solve the problem, because I'm a solver. Like, with everyone I've dated in the past, they're just like, I'm just trying to get you to listen to my problem. And I'm like, let's just go into solving mode. There's no point in dwelling on it. So I think that I'm probably not common, but I got into very hyper focused solution mode. Literally a company came out of it. So that was as hyper focused as we could get. I would say that was probably like 90%. I think the 10%, which I think generally is more relatable to people, that I think came in waves, but not all at once like it did for some people, is just reflecting back on my past and being like, if I had knew then, would that have looked different? Would that have looked different? Would I have chosen a different path? And so that definitely was a big part of my acceptance journey. But I think just philosophically, like me as Chris, I've always said that I don't never regret anything in the past, because in the moment it was the best I could have done with the best information I had at hand. And I think my parents also were doing the best they could with the best information they had at hand. They weren't on purpose trying not to talk about mental health. They were born into a family that just didn't. And so I think with that lens, the ADHD grief of what could have been, it comes in waves. But in general, I try to just focus on the solution, which I get a lot of complaints that I do that. But it was mostly just about, okay, how do you fix this? What are all the options? What are the pros and cons about them? And then just trying to meet a lot of other people who have gone through similar things before and trying to figure out from them what the best path is. And I probably just went into optimization mode.
I love what you said about the acceptance part, because I feel like everybody goes through a bit of this grief and acceptance. And some people might go through that faster than others. So it sounds like you accepted it very quickly and just moved straight into, okay, what can I do about it now? But then there's other people who, like myself, I had a mixture of both. I had definitely had this grief moment about what could have been, and I wish I realized it sooner. But I like what you said in terms of it all led up to where it is now. Everything that you went through it happened, and it is what it is. And now you've realized it. And what can you do to go forward? And
exactly.
If all that stuff didn't happen, you wouldn't be where you are now. And where you are now is you've obviously created a company around it as well. But it's all led up to this moment now, and it's about the future. Did you have a similar thing, Jesse, about this sort of grief, acceptance, and solution?
Yeah, I would say I'm also a pretty optimistic person. And so when I first found out, I was similar. I was just, this is amazing. Something that explains this thing I've struggled with. And so initially, I was just research, find out everything I could about it. And then there were definitely periods like that. Yeah, having waves of remembering things that happened or lost opportunities, and just like several times, I can right off the top of my head, I can think of 3 different jobs where I had a moment where my manager basically said, what the heck is wrong with you? Why can't you do this? You're the only person I've ever had any problem with. I've had that like 3 very significant moments I can think of right now where that happened. And just brutal at the time, because you're like, I have no idea. I feel I'm trying to do my best here, and I don't know what that thing is that clearly is setting me apart from all your other employees somehow, but I don't know what it is. And so that's the sort of thing I look back on. And I wish I could just remove those brutal moments, because those just come back in flashes at times where you
Yeah.
just feel terrible about yourself because you think
Yeah.
of this situation and you're like, oh, why did that happen? And so that was part of it. I would say looking back, it's just like, oh, if only I'd known, I could have at least understood for myself what was going on in the situation, because instead it just felt like the same sort of stuff when I was a kid, where it was like, I don't know why I'm not able to do what everyone thinks that I should be doing, or why I'm not reaching my potential, or why whatever the thing is. So I would say, yeah, in general, I was pretty optimistic, but definitely waves of that where it's hard not to beat yourself up at times when you feel decades of built up shame of not knowing why things aren't working the way you want them to work, and why you have the best intentions and they just don't result in the actions that you think they should.
Yeah.
So that's been my experience with that. What about you, Marie?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. There's just such a wave of emotions that come with it. The clarity, there is also this clarity moment that you said, you suddenly like, oh, everything, you have these flashes back to certain moments. And I also got excited, like, oh, yeah, that's why it's really nice having the explanation, because when you don't have the explanation, that's when you think, oh, there's something wrong with me. But once you know why and there's some reason for that, then it just feels, oh, it all just clicked into place. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think once you realize that, there's definitely like this excitement of, oh, yeah, it all makes sense now. Like my whole life makes sense. And then there's also this little bit of panic, like, oh my God, what do I do now? What can I do to solve it? But what now? Like now that I know, what now? But there's like definitely this wave of things happening, and it's really like a lot. I think it was like a lot. It's like, oh, and it all hits at different times and sometimes all at once. And it's just, like you said, the waves that come later. But yeah, there's definitely like stages that you would go through when that happens.
I think one of the great things about it is just discovering, oh, it's not just me. Because that's what it feels, that's what it felt like my whole life, is it's just me. It's just me that's broken somehow. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but I'm the one weird one. And finding out about ADHD, I think part of the joy or whatever, the elation I felt from finding that out, is it's not just me. I'm not alone with this. And being able to eventually seek out and meet lots of other awesome people with ADHD that get it, that understand what it's like with the weirdness that comes with ADHD, the forgotten details, the way time feels like you can't quite grasp it, but other people can. And just knowing that there's other people that way too, that feel the same way. And a lot of the like content I post online is just like silly jokes about things I struggle with. And then lots of people like it because they struggle with it too. That feels like pretty amazing that it's universal within this community of people with ADHD, which is pretty awesome.
There's this quote that really hit home for me. It was, the single most debilitating thing about ADHD is the shame. So it's not any symptom or any specific thing that you struggle with. It's the shame that you put and other people put on yourself for thinking that things should be easier or should be like this, or that you're dumb or you're not talented or whatever it is. And I think that really hits home for me, because it's a lot, I guess what you said. Imagine if your whole life you had this like really heavy backpack, but you didn't know it was there and you couldn't see it. And the whole time you're like, oh, why am I so slow? I must just be like slower than everyone else. And then one day you discover you have the backpack. And to like the reaction point, I guess there's like kind of two sets of reactions. Like one, you can be like, oh, damn it. If I just knew I had this backpack, I could have taken it off this whole time and won all the races. But at the same time, also you're like, oh my gosh, now I know about this backpack. I can start to take pieces off the backpack and it can become lighter. So I think it's really not either or. It's a mix of those two feelings that happen.
Yeah. And backpack does contain some useful things sometimes. Being really good under pressure or in an emergency situation, or just having hyperfocus. Like sometimes there's good things in the backpack. Even though overall the backpack does weigh you down a bit, you can sometimes pull some magic out of it. I like this backpack analogy. I've never heard it. I've never heard that before, but I'm going to remember that.
I actually originally heard it from Natalie from Near Road, who's also from Australia, but she said it slightly differently for a different topic. I'll just tell it. She said, you're going up a mountain with all of your friends and you have a way heavier backpack than them. And so all of them are climbing up this mountain, and you're climbing up the mountain, and you don't realize that you have the backpack. So I thought that was really resonant. But I like what you added about the strengths, because maybe you hate your backpack so much that you never look inside of it because you're so upset at it. And then when you finally accept it for what it is, then you can look in the backpack and realize that there's a lot of fun things. This is starting to sound like a cartoon or something.
No, I think it's great. And actually,
it does feel a little Dora the Explorer.
No, I love it. I love it. And I think maybe that's a great place to end the pod and wrap up. Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. It's a really great conversation. Hopefully people can relate to it. If people want to find you online, Chris, where can they go?
The best place is probably Instagram at adhd.christal or at shimmer.care, or you can just head to our website. You just search Shimmer ADHD, you'll probably find us.
Yeah.
But it's shimmer.care.
Cool. And Jesse, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me online anywhere. My username is usually ADHD Jesse. I'm really big on Blue Sky right now. So if you're one of the people jumping over to Blue Sky, you can follow me there. My username there is actually ADHDjesse.com, because Blue Sky, without getting too nerdy, Blue Sky lets you verify your username by owning the domain. It's pretty rad. Anyway, or you can find my newsletter at extrafocus.com, and my book's available wherever books are sold. How about you, Marie?
People can find me on Twitter. I'm at 3 Hour Coffee, just spelled out 3 Hour Coffee, or Llama Life. Just search for Llama Life in the App Store and Google Play.